4 million people walked out of slavery in 1865 and into a country that had no plan for them. No land, no money, no schools, no legal infrastructure built to treat them as citizens. The promise, 40 acres and a mule, was real enough that formerly enslaved families began staking out plots of confiscated Confederate land along the South Carolina coast within weeks of the war's end. Then Andrew Johnson became president. Then he pardoned the Confederate landowners. Then he ordered the land returned. Federal soldiers went door to door on those Sea Island farms and physically removed the black families who had already started planting. If you want to understand why Reconstruction failed and why that failure still echoes in American life today, that image is where you start. A man standing in the field he thought was finally his, watching a Union soldier hand it back to the man who had once owned him. Civil War A1 Timeline reconstructs these vanished moments with the visual depth they deserve, because Reconstruction is the most consequential chapter of American history that most Americans were never properly taught. By the time this video ends, you will see what America actually looked like in the decade after 1865, the extraordinary things that briefly became possible, the forces that destroyed them, and the specific decisions made by specific people that shaped the country you are living in right now. This is not ancient history. The bones of Reconstruction are underneath everything. Begin with the sheer scale of what the country faced in April 1865. The Confederate States were not just defeated, they were physically shattered. Richmond lay in ruins, burned during the evacuation. Atlanta had been methodically destroyed. The rail network across the South was wrecked for hundreds of miles. The Southern economy, built entirely on enslaved labor, had ceased to function. White Southern landowners had land they could no longer farm without the unpaid labor that had made it profitable, and they had no intention of paying wages if any alternative could be arranged. 4 million black Americans had their freedom and almost nothing else. And presiding over this catastrophe was a federal government that had never faced anything remotely like it, trying to simultaneously demobilize the largest army in American history, manage occupied territory, and engineer the reintegration of 11 states that had spent 4 years trying to destroy the Union. Lincoln had sketched a lenient approach before his death: quick restoration, limited conditions for Southern states to return. What replaced his vision after John Wilkes Booth's bullet was something far more volatile. Andrew Johnson, a Tennessee Democrat who had remained loyal to the Union more out of personal stubbornness than any ideological commitment to racial equality, took Lincoln's leniency and pushed it to an extreme that stunned even moderate Republicans. Johnson's Reconstruction plan required almost nothing from former Confederate states: no meaningful protections for freed people, no political rights for black men, and pardons handed out so freely that former Confederate generals were back in state legislatures within months of the surrender at Appomattox. Congress looked at what Johnson was doing and revolted. The result was radical Reconstruction beginning in 1867, and what it briefly produced was one of the most radical democratic experiments in American history. The 13th Amendment had abolished slavery in 1865. The 14th, ratified in 1868, made black Americans citizens and guaranteed equal protection under the law. The 15th, ratified in 1870, prohibited denying the vote based on race, and black men in the South exercised that vote with an urgency that makes complete sense when you understand they knew exactly how fragile the moment was. Between 1870 and 1877, 16 black men served in the United States Congress. Over 600 served in Southern state legislatures. Hiram Revels of Mississippi became the first black U.S. Senator in 1870, occupying the very seat Jefferson Davis had vacated to lead the Confederacy. Here is a detail almost no one knows. The Reconstruction-era Mississippi legislature, with significant black membership, built the state's first public school system from scratch for both races. Before Reconstruction, Mississippi had virtually no public education infrastructure at all. The schools built during those years were among the most durable achievements of the era, even as everything else was being dismantled around them. The Freedmen's Bureau deserves its own reckoning. Established in 1865 and underfunded from its first day of operation, it was charged with an almost incomprehensible mandate: negotiate labor contracts, adjudicate disputes between freed people and white employers, distribute food and clothing to refugees of both races, establish schools, and provide medical care, all across the former Confederate states, with a staff so small that individual agents were often responsible for entire counties. The Bureau's agents included idealists, opportunists, the dedicated, and the corrupt, in roughly the same proportions you would find in any large organization. What they managed to accomplish, given their resources, was remarkable. What they failed to prevent, the systematic violence, the fraudulent labor contracts, the legal structures being rebuilt to enforce dependency, revealed precisely how much resistance they were operating against. Sit with this for a moment. Think about what it meant to be a black family in South Carolina in 1868. 3 years earlier, you were property. Now, you are a citizen. Your husband or father has voted for the first time in his life. Your children are walking to a school that did not exist 2 years ago. The future, for the first time in your family's entire memory on this continent, is not foreclosed. You are building something. You are planting something. And you are doing all of this while white neighbors who lost the war are watching you with a fury they have not finished expressing. The Ku Klux Klan was founded in Pulaski, Tennessee in 1865, the same year the war ended. It was not a fringe movement. By 1868, it was a coordinated campaign of political terrorism operating across the South, targeting black voters, Republican office holders, white allies, and Freedmen's Bureau agents. The violence was not random. It was strategic. It was designed to accomplish through murder and intimidation what the Confederacy had failed to accomplish on the battlefield. Congress responded with the Enforcement Acts of 1870 and 1871, which gave the federal government authority to prosecute Klan violence and suspend habeas corpus in areas under terrorist siege. Grant's administration used these laws aggressively in South Carolina, breaking the Klan's organization there within 2 years. It worked. When the federal government committed to enforcement, the violence could be suppressed. That is the devastating lesson of Reconstruction. The experiment was not doomed by its own internal contradictions. It was abandoned. The Compromise of 1877 is the quiet tombstone. Rutherford Hayes needed Southern electoral votes to win the presidency. Southern Democrats needed federal troops out of the South. The deal was struck in a Washington hotel and sealed without a single black American in the room. Federal troops withdrew. The Republican state governments in the South collapsed within months. The legal architecture of Jim Crow, segregation laws, poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, rose directly from the wreckage. The constitutional amendments remained on paper. The reality they had briefly created was gone. One man, named John Roy Lynch, a formerly enslaved man from Mississippi who had served 3 terms in Congress during Reconstruction, spent decades afterward writing the history of the era because he watched everyone else getting it wrong. He lived until 1939. He saw the lost cause mythology fully calcify around him. He kept writing anyway, insisting with documentary precision that what Reconstruction had briefly achieved was real, that it had worked where it was allowed to work, and that its destruction was a choice, not an inevitability. If this channel has handed you something you needed, the real story told with the honesty it demands, then subscribing to Civil War AI Timeline is how you keep receiving it. And next time, we are going inside the mind and the maps of Ulysses S. Grant, examining the question historians still argue about. Was he the greatest general America ever produced, or the most catastrophically overrated president, and how one man managed to be both at the same time?